So today's talk is about acceptance, but acceptance on a deep, comprehensive level. Tara Brach would say radical acceptance. So the idea of not just being okay with things, but being fundamentally, physically open to situations. So our mental experience can be broken down into the three tiers we've talked about a lot. Our mental experience, our felt senses or emotional experiences, and our actual physical sense of being. And that physical sense of being plays a very important role in our ability to be able to open up to our world or to withdraw from our world. That physical sense of being is largely unconscious or subconscious. It lies beneath the conscious level. We're talking about the circulatory system or the respiratory system, the digestive system, the neurological system, all the operations of our body functions that happen completely on their own without our input or our control until something goes wrong. If there's a problem in any of those areas, then all of a sudden bells and whistles go off and we know in a big way. One of the ways that we actually deal with that being level or that physical somatic level of experience is the neurological system, which includes that sense of anxiety. Sometimes people think of anxiety more on the full-blown levels, more the felt senses, the feeling of unease, or also the intellectual sense of the things that make us anxious. We tend to cognify it very much all the time. I'm anxious because of blah, blah, blah. But the actual anxiety itself is a very basic physical level. It is basically tied into our survival mechanism, which in human beings is very, very strong. That's why we ended up the top of the food chain, probably, you might say. And that's no exalted place to be, because I'm not sure we've done very much to move beyond that defensive state of mind and really actually begin to thrive with all of the power that we've got. Interestingly enough, the cerebral cortexes that sort of separate us from other animal life on the planet is considered by us to be a higher development. It is a later development. It is a higher processing power in the mind. When we developed that, we simultaneously lost our fangs and our claws and our scales. And that cerebral cortex that we think of more as this beautiful mechanism was actually developed as a defensive strategy mechanism, a way to remember how to outrun predators, a way to out-scheme and outsmart the danger in our world. To this day, even though that higher cerebral cortex has written the plays of Shakespeare, it's also largely dedicated to just pure defensiveness. When we are triggered in our neurological system, deep in our sense of being, when we get frightened or thrown, we'll actually stay up all night ruminating over and over again what we should have done or could have done. That's because the brain has been activated in its defensive way. The interesting thing is there are minimal amounts of danger. There's a minimal amount of danger in our everyday life from bears, from predators, from saber-toothed lions in particular. Those things are not really part of our world, and yet the fear, the reactivity that we have around those things is still very much part of it. What supplanted the actual danger in our mind is this kind of theoretical danger that is created by our ego. When the ego feels threatened, it's as though the self is threatened. It's as though we are threatened. and our defensive mechanism comes into play. We actually put so much effort and energy into strategizing and trying to extricate ourselves from danger over things that are relatively inconsequential. Somebody cut us off in traffic. Somebody didn't want to go out with us. Somebody hung up the phone a little brusquely. Somebody said something about us that actually hurt deeply, okay, hurt our feelings. But we react as though we were stabbed in the heart. And we might lay in bed all night going over and over what we could have said in return, what we should have said. And this is like the mind's way of trying to gain control over a situation that's been out of control. This is the way the brain overreacts to stress because it does not, for all its brilliance, for all its genius, does not really understand anxiety. It doesn't really understand that feeling of threat that we have in circumstances that are really not threatening. We kind of live with that, create that issue. Deep, comprehensive acceptance has to do with actually relaxing the body. When we become triggered neurologically, when we become triggered because of anxiety, we actually tense up. Tension creates a lack of space in our body. It's actually a squeezing of the body. And I think there's not direct science to this, but it's as if we're reducing the aperture of the conduit of the energy flow and increasing the pressure of whatever is happening in our body, the ill ease up into the brain, completely destabilizing the brain and making the brain have to work overtime to figure out how to again gain control over a circumstance that it finds really threatening, but in fact may not be threatening at all, which means we're reacting in an outsized way to circumstances, completely inappropriate to circumstances in our life. Falling in depression for weeks over something that's really inconsequential, lashing out at somebody and hurting them because they said something we did not even mean to hurt them. Working in so many ways against ourselves because we're walking on eggshells and not to hurt or piss ourselves off. And really dealing with that wounded self constantly. Interestingly enough, acceptance is beginning to accept even in the body. When we create tension in the body because of an ill ease inside of us, it's like putting a brake on, a phantom brake when you're the passenger in the car and you don't like the way somebody's driving and you'll put the brake on. Well, that's what tension in our body is. It's a way of trying to put the brakes on because life is moving too quickly. Or it's a way of trying to speed life up because it's going too slowly. We're trying to manipulate our life, which means we're not accepting our life. If you have tension in your body, you're not in full acceptance. One of the ways that we gain tools in our meditation practice is to become more aware of our body, our spirit, our mind, and these triggers. To become aware of our body, meditation, mindfulness of the body is kind of becoming aware of how we feel. When we become aware of how we feel, we might naturally mediate that toward a state of more relaxation. Now, why would we do that? Well, the point is that when we act out of serenity and balance and openness, our actions are more responsive, they're more considered, they're more mindful, and probably most of the time more accurate. In fact, sometimes maybe dead on accurate because we're really present. We're not influencing life with our attention. We're not trying to exaggerate responses by defensive actions. We're actually open, calm, responsive, and then just simply do what needs to be done. So if the mind works at its best when it's open and serene, it kind of works at its worst when it's agitated and freaked out. Yet when we're agitated and freaked out and we want to respond to all of that, we feel our response has to be just as huge as the pain we're experiencing, which is really not the case. It's like, actually, a lot of times we could solve an issue with minimal effort. Just a smile, just sitting upright, just letting go of the tension and being able to apply a fresh mind to what we're doing. One example of how this works, and I've used this example in class before, you may have remembered this, but it was when we lose our keys. And we lose our keys, say, in the morning on our way to work, and we never really lose our keys unless we're already stressed and late, right? So there we are running around the house looking for the keys, and in fact, making matters worse because our brain isn't consciously, cognitively, carefully trying to remember where the keys might be. Our brain is spinning around in this defensive freak out. It's yelling at us for, why did we drink so much last night? Why don't we have a place where you just put the keys? And we have all of this extra stuff. Maybe we even start sweeping the kitchen just because we're so nervous. We start doing things that are inconsequential. And I think most of us that are meditators have had the experience of just stopping, sitting down on our bed and just coming back into a sense of wholeness and serenity, and then being like, oh yeah, that's where the keys are. It doesn't work every time, but it's a more effective way to find the keys. And if nothing else, it's a more effective way to be with lost keys, where you're just centered and present and not just making matters worse by running around. So suffice it to say, when we act out of agitation and freak out, reaction, we're not acting in our best interest, nor in the best interest of any situation. When we act out of serenity and openness, chances are we're able to do the right thing at the right time. We're more responsive. The reason for this is that when we're freaking out, the entire space around us condenses down in tunnel vision to just the reaction. And that gives us a very limited palette of things that we can do. We almost always do the same thing when we're very triggered. We get upset in the same ways, or angry in the same ways, or try to run away in the same way. We have a very limited set of reactions, and none of them really have to do with the actual thing that we're relating to. Usually when we're very upset, we're arguing with another person. And you know, Charlie, you will fall in love again, and it'll be a wonderful thing. And it won't be long before you're fighting and arguing with this person, because that's inevitable, because two human beings in the same space will eventually fight for supremacy over that space, right? Or control of that space. And there's nothing that pulls our control away like someone that loves us, right? Or someone we love. And in a way, when we get triggered like that, we're all of a sudden not seeing that person anymore. We're fighting with them because we're fighting with everybody in our life we've ever fought with. That one person becomes all the people that have hurt us. That one person becomes not that person at all, but just an agent of our freak out, a way, a canvas for us to project all of our neurosis on as it spews from us. Because we're operating out of a body of so much tension, it has no real room to maneuver. And it just explodes, if you will. When conversely, we drop that, come back into the body, feel the tension, release the tension, and come back into wholeness and find some serenity and peace, it's like the aperture opens altogether. Everything relaxes, the energy flow slows down between mind and body, and our whole palette becomes richer and wider. Our peripheral vision becomes clearer. In meditation theory, we talk about a state called panoramic awareness, which is a state of, increased awareness as a result of our meditation practice, to where we actually see the bigger picture of things. We actually zoom out and see the larger context. All of a sudden, our problems don't have the magnitude. Our issues don't have to be resolved in a binary way. All of a sudden, we have much more space, clarity, and room to maneuver, because we're coming from a base of serenity, not a base of freaking out. When we're freaking out, we have very limited responses we can do. When we're relaxed and open, we have a wide range of creative responses we could employ in any situation, including not responding at all, including just allowing circumstances to be as they are, which is sometimes an option. The freaked out mind always wants an answer, whereas serene mind could wait for an answer, or could accept that there is no answer. So it's almost like we have this binary of two different minds: a freaked out mind that actually can only respond in passion, aggression, and ignorance. Either we're trying to run away and do something to ignore the situation, or we're fighting the situation. But the mind of enlightenment, the mind of meditation, the mind of awake, is the mind of serenity, which gives us all of this room to move. So eventually, I'll close with this idea: meditation actually increases the space between the input and our actions out. Okay, it's either a reaction or eventually a response, and even beyond the response, a mindful response. So the more we employ mindfulness meditation in our practice, the more we recognize when the mind is distracted, lost in a thought, believing some scenario, and the more we gain the power to be able to release ourselves from that and bring ourselves back to now and back to the present, the more space that we create between our anxiety and whatever reaction we have. Anxiety is an interesting thing. It has to do with our life force, and it has to do with the protective mechanism. We're not likely to be able to just get rid of that, but we can learn not to act on it. We can learn to smile at it and to allow it to just simply be, And we're sitting there and there's a little thought balloon saying, wow, I'm really anxious. And yet we're still kind and we're still present. And we're still able to be even and mediating. Someone asked one of my meditation teachers if the Buddha felt pain. I've said this a lot, and I don't remember if the Buddha felt pain, or if the Buddha felt anger, or if the Buddha felt anxiety. But does the Buddha feel all of these things? Ideally, when we become enlightened, do we feel all of these things? Does the Dalai Lama, the Thich Nhat Hanh, feel these things? Well, the answer was more than we do. The answer is the Buddha felt more pain, more anxiety, more depression, and more anger than we do, just had the control over their mind not to act on it. Had the control over the mind to sit there and say, wow, I'm really freaked out right now. And allow that to wake us up, pay attention to the body, come back to the body, and wait until the time is appropriate to respond. So we learn this in meditation by coming back to the breath, because that's exactly what I recommend that you do in your life when you get triggered, whatever the triggering is, whether it's a positive trigger of like, I want one more drink, but you know you have to drive home, or I really want a kiss from this person that is married to someone else, or I really want to enjoy something brilliant in my life, you know, that is not really good for me. We might actually could just breathe out and feel our body and wait until we come back to a state of relaxation and openness. Finally, that state of relaxation and openness is kind of a divine situation. It is really the way we engage with our higher power, or engage with God, if you will, engage with the mind of the Buddha. The mind of the Buddha is not the freaked out mind. The mind of the Buddha is when we're in serenity, when we're relaxed and we're peace, and we just listen. I promise you this, if you're nervous and unsure about a decision you have to make, if you go into meditation and calm your mind, open your heart, scan your body for tension and try to relax into it, that a better answer will come to you very naturally than anything you could figure out by screaming and yelling and getting on the phone and talking again and again to people. Go inside and feel your heart. Shut your mouth and just listen. STFU. And listen to your higher power. So there's a saying I know in the 12 step of the recovery world of halt. You might have heard that. I think that's become famous outside of the recovery world, of when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that those are places that you're more likely to be triggered. So actually being able to sort of sense when we are more likely to be triggered. And I made my own, which is kind of a little less about the recovery and more about meditation. And it's for when we're stressed, tense, tired, or irritable. Stress, tense, irritable, or tired. So the acronym is SHIT, and that's what our mood is. So when we're in a shit mood, we're likely to have a shit result to our actions. And those are times when we're stressed, when we're irritable, when we're tired, when we're hyper, that we're really kind of nervous about them and about that situation. We're not acting out of serenity. We're acting out of an impacted state, which is only going to lead to an impacted state.